Did you see the box office? Oh my god. Okay, well, I have some tabs popped up for that.
It's not a bird, it's not a plane, it's Superhero Slate. It's a modern podcast where we talk about everything that's great, like movies, TV, superheroes. It's Superhero Slate, oh yeah.
Hello everyone and welcome to Superhero Slate, the show where we run down the latest superhero entertainment news.
We love TV, movies, and superheroes, so let's talk it all out.
My name is Chris Dillard.
And my name is Mike Royer.
And welcome to the Hellboy review and spoiler cast.
That's right. Just like every movie or TV show that we review here on the Superhero Slate, we're going to hit you with spoiler-free thoughts and opinions on whatever we're talking about today, which happens to be Hellboy. Mm-hmm. And then we'll give you a pretty clear, concise warning when we jump into spoilers. But there's a good chance that if you check out the box office for this movie, you may not have seen this movie yet.
I don't think a lot... This movie sits in a weird place, Mike, and not because of the reviews. I think you have literally Shazam coming out last week and Endgame in 2 weeks. And most people, I assume, maybe not on a fixed budget, but like their entertainment budget isn't going to allow them to watch all three of these movies.
Yeah, and also it's a rated R film too, so you're already kind of narrowing your audience a little bit. But obviously that doesn't always mean, we've seen Hellboy. I mean, we've seen Deadpool. We know exactly what a rated R movie can do box office wise, so that's not always a dampener. But I thought it was pretty funny. I was at the movie theater last night, and the row in front of me, we were in like these reclining seats, so I couldn't clearly see the people in front of me, but I think there was like a young girl sitting next to it, because once you get to some of the gorier parts of the film, I saw the mom like darting her hand over to cover up her daughter's eyes, and I was just like, do you not look at the ratings for these movies before you go to them? This one was rated R. Like, you have to like, what are you doing?
The title is Hellboy.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's not like it's sugarcoating. It's like, rainbows and unicorns. It's like, dude, there's gonna be something to deal with demons and hell and blood and gore, and there is some blood and gore in this for sure.
Yeah, and they tried to get people's expectations ready for it, because you showed me a trailer maybe a week or two ago.
About a week ago.
Yeah, it was a red band trailer that says like, "Oh, get ready for the gore." So I was ready. I was prepared for the gore, but I guess to just kind of jump into it, I had like really weird expectations for this movie going into it. Before I had heard like any reviews or anything had come out, I was pretty optimistic about this movie. I really liked David Harbour. The trailers weren't really blowing me away, but I was like, this looks like fun. This looks like they're breathing some new life into Hellboy. We were probably never gonna get that third Ron Perlman movie, just because Guillermo del Toro like doesn't do half the stuff that's announced for him anyway. And Ron Perlman's getting a little older, and if there would have been a third movie, it definitely would have been the last one. And studios want to relaunch franchises, so I didn't have any ill will towards this movie. But then I started hearing some kind of caged, kind of side-eyed talk about this movie on the internet when the review embargo was up. But I tried to avoid it, and I was like, I don't really know what all this means. But then I scrolled through an Instagram post, and I saw somebody comment that said this movie was sitting at like 9% on Rotten Tomato. And I was like, what? No way this movie is 9% on Rotten Tomato. That's got to be like a typo or a misprint or something. And I was like, and I wasn't really sure, if all the reviews were out there yet. So I went into this movie very, very concerned. So I lowered my expectations way down to the floor. And Chris, it did not help.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was reading the reviews, and I'm going to tell you right now, I went on Thursday night. I went opening night, first showing. I didn't go IMAX. I don't think this movie deserves an IMAX viewing. So if you're going to watch it regular. But I went with my friend Jeremy, who went to C2E2 with me the past several years. And to preface this, me and him have read he has read every Hellboy issue ever made.
Oh, wow.
Like, he is a Hellboy fan. And also a curator of Hellboy knowledge, if you will.
Good. I'm going to love to hear what he has to say when we get into spoilers for this movie.
Exactly. So me and him went, and I think, we went and had some food and a couple drinks before we got in there. We got in 20 minutes late because our food service was slow, but they were still doing trailers. So it's not like we had to do it. But I mean, I'm gonna probably go the other route and be like, look, my expectations were low, but having read Hellboy, I actually found this movie a little more refreshing than probably most people. And
Wow.
I'm not gonna say you gotta run out and watch Hellboy in the theaters. Oh my god, it's gonna blow your mind. But like, this is a movie like I wanted to turn off and just watch, and guess what I did? I turned off and I watched it. I really enjoyed some of the little nuggets in this movie, and we'll talk about it here in a little bit. But by no means is this a perfect movie that is going to change your world, or, as you can tell by the box office numbers, change people's minds about watching Hellboy, for sure, or wanting that reboot or something like that. So I it's hard to not get into spoilers, Mike, because literally like everything I want to say has been like, I've kind of been planning it out, like kind of talking about it to myself a little bit, trying to get ready for this. So I think, do you have anything else you want to add, or you want to get right into this? You want to get into the down and dirty?
Yeah. I think we just need to get into the gritty. You're either going to go see this movie or you're not. So
Yeah.
I think we just need to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like there is no easy way to say this is not the movie we were kind of promised for Hellboy by any means. But I will tell you, Mike, and you said you were curious, does it follow the Hellboy lore?
Oh, yes, please, because there was some pretty big reveals for the origins of the character of Hellboy. Then after I left the movie, I went on Wikipedia to be like, this can't be right. This can't be what Mike Mignola wanted for Hellboy.
And guess what it was, wasn't it?
Well, it was kind of was. When I looked up Hellboy's like kind of lineage on Wikipedia, he seemed to have been descended from some sort of royal kind of like king, but it definitely was not King Arthur.
It actually is King Arthur. There's a whole series that Mignola wrote about Camelot and the Knights of the Round Table and all that stuff, and then you find out that he actually is, in fact, the one of the heirs to the King of England. So that's actually really within the storylines as well.
But not specifically King Arthur, though.
No,
right?
no, it is. It is.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
The whole
Well.
Merlin. Now, I will tell you, do they handle it well in this? By no means, because
no.
I will tell you, this movie opens with a flashback and a voiceover. And when a movie opens with a flashback and a voiceover, does that get me excited? By no fucking means does it get me excited. I actually laughed out loud because they had the witch, the Blood Queen, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna surrender," and she's like, "You can't hurt me," and then he's like, "Brother's like Excalibur," and I'm like, "Oh my god!" Like that was the most
just so
ham-fisted
cheesy.
thing
ever.
Now I will say that, some people have I mean, I'm not apologetic for this film, because it doesn't hold up under a microscope at all. But I will tell you, I really appreciate how fast this movie went from scene to scene to scene, because if it was any slower, I'd have just checked right out.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's crazy. I saw some people saying, how can a movie with so much plot be so boring? And I like one of my biggest threshold tests for films is if I'm in the movie and I find myself more entertained just by looking off to my side and just like staring at the ground for a couple of seconds, that's not a good sign. And that happened in this movie. I was sitting at the very edge and I was like, oh, these are running lights that run along the carpet in the theater. This is pretty interesting. So that's not a good sign if I'm checking out of the movie for that. But yeah, you kind of hit it off the bat there. This movie does not start off on a good foot, and it just pervasive throughout the whole movie of how much narration, exposition, so many flashbacks. It's like
everyone's got a flashback. If you meet them in this movie, they're like, they got a flashback. And I even said it in the parking lot leaving the film. I'm like, look, I think that's, to me, honestly, I like this better than the Golden Army, and that's going to be very, people are going to be polarized at that statement. But I think I like the characters from the first movie, Abe and what's her name? Can't think of her name. His love interest in the first movie, whatever. Is it Liz Sherman?
It sounds like you have a better memory of the original Hellboy movies, because my memory is so shot. I think I saw the first Hellboy movie in theaters, and I literally haven't seen it since then. But maybe you can tell me if this happened in those movies, because this movie desperately needs like an audience surrogate or like a conduit. It needs like somebody who's never seen this paranormal investigation department to be folded in, so all of these characters can kind of explain to this new person what's going on. Because without this kind of like new person into the fold, kind of like Men in Black style, kind of like Will Smith going in and people describing all this weird stuff to him. It's just a bunch of like exposition to other characters, just saying like what's going on and how they're feeling. Like a lot of people are explaining paranormal things to Hellboy, and I'm just like, Hellboy's like a demon monster with a rock hand and a tail and horns. Like, he should know all of this stuff already. No one needs to explain anything to him. You know,
having read the books, he is the world's best paranormal investigator. Did he do any investigating in this movie at all?
No, not at all.
Not at all. He is more violent and snarky than in the comic book version, which is kind of a turnoff to me, because they literally say, we brought you here because you're the world's best paranormal investigator. And he didn't really do any investigating whatsoever. He just beat the shit out of trolls and demons. But I agree with that. Like the characters, like in the first one, I think there is a character who's new to the BPRD, and like he's your lifeline through it. Like he's watching all of this stuff. And this movie serves as it serves like, you've already seen Hellboy 1 and 2, right? But it's also a prequel to Hellboy 1 in some ways, because you don't get the character. I mean, we're in spoilers. You don't find Abe until the end of this movie. And I actually thought that scene at the end was probably my favorite one, where they go through the thing in like the single long shot. I'm like, oh my god, that's really cool. But why is this at the end of the movie?
Yeah, and it felt like an after credit scene before the credits had even rolled. You know, they're playing like Motley Crue. They're like fighting in a group, and then they find another monster. It's like, this should have been the movie. Yeah. This should have been what we were watching. Not all of this just crazy nonsense. But
and everyone wants to kill Hellboy.
Yeah, but I mean, I liked David Harbour as an actor. I was okay with his performance as Hellboy. I just think he should have been in an overall a better movie. Mm-hmm. But also, I'm trying to figure out who kind of signed off on whatever like structural makeup that you're putting on him, because you can't understand half the stuff that he's saying, because it sounds like there's always cotton balls in his mouth. But then there's also really obvious ADR in this movie that makes him actually sound very legible, because it's just him in a studio in front of a microphone. So I'm almost just thinking you might have been better off just ADRing every single scene David Harbour was in, because at least you could have understood what he was saying. So like every time you kind of hear his like marble cotton mouth, you're just imagining somebody in a costume. Like, I could never connect with Hellboy being a real person, because his like arm, his big like juggernaut gauntlet arm, is just always just dangling to his side. He's never using it. He's never interacting with it. Like, it's just never like an extension of him. And then also his tail, you only ever see it just flop around out of his trench coat when he's like running around. It's not really, I don't know if it's necessarily supposed to be prehensile, but there's not even any character in there in it. And I think this also gives this weird polarizing production design that you're inundated with this film, where some of the monsters look really cool. Like that like warthog kind of character was kind of cool looking, because he had this like CG head on top of like this human body. Baba Yaga was super creepy.
Oh man, I think she was the best design in all of this.
Oh yeah, because they got like a real contortionist in there. They put some awesome makeup on there. That's something that they were thinking of Del Toro the whole time they were making that character, because that looks like that witch crawled straight out of like Pan's Labyrinth. Yeah. Super creepy, and I was digging those scenes. So cool. But then at the same time, you stare at Hellboy's like horn stubs the whole movie, and it's just like, that just looks like two hunks of plastic on the top of your head. And it's so obvious when the dad comes in as like pseudo shaving them, and it's like, what am I looking at here? How can you have such a cool creepy monster next to basically just like plastic bones on the ground? And also the makeup isn't any better. There's like really cringy makeup on Merlin later in the movie. The Blood Queen's sister, when she comes back halfway through the film, literally looks like they picked up like a Halloween paint palette from like Walmart and painted her face. So I just don't understand what's going on here. It's just like, it's just a mess.
I will tell you, the very end with Ian McShane's floating head on the massive nasty body looks the same as that Infinity War photo you keep sending me with Don Cheadle photoshopped onto a CGI.
That magazine cover. Like, stay tuned for our normal news episodes where we kind of talk about this weird stuff.
Like, that head does not match the body. Like, that was very poor CGI. And I like Ian McShane as an actor too. Like, I think the actors were well suited in their roles.
Yeah,
but like the movie did not do any of them justice. I enjoyed Alice, I believe her name was. But I gotta ask you, how the hell did she know to show up in a field full of trolls with a van for Hellboy? Like, well, how convenient is her character in all of these plot points?
And I couldn't help but roll my eyes when she started punching the souls out of zombies. And it was just like, I didn't know you could do that. And it's like, I didn't know either. It's just like, what is going on here? This is just the dumbest thing. And the thing is, it sounds like I'm being hard on this movie, and I'm definitely am. But this isn't like the worst offensive movie I've ever seen. This isn't like me coming out of like Batman vs. Superman, or coming out of like, or Fantastic Four or Suicide Squad. It's just like, it just seemed like you had so much potential in this movie, and it just got flushed down the drain. Like this needed a totally different tone and director to it. Like when I was watching this movie, I kept thinking Sam Raimi needed to direct this movie. This needs like a less serious tone, but like lean into the goofiness. I don't really know what is going on.
I don't think it should have gone goofy. I think it should have leaned into the horror supernatural aspects more, because some of those things were pretty cool looking, and like when he became a Nung Rama and the hell opened up and all those creatures came out, I'm like, damn, I would love to see like, you know, an actual hell inspired like I don't know if I can, what's that called, Silent Hill style movie, like
like a pyramid head walking through.
And Hellboy's actually like trying to solve all these paranormal things going on, because the only time he actually did any investigation was he was called on for Alice when she was young and she was kidnapped by a changeling in the ferry. I'm like, oh, that's like, could you imagine like an actual film noir style thing where Hellboy's going from case to case solving these like paranormal things leading up to like a larger spirit? Put him in Supernatural. Give him a Supernatural TV show. Like, take one of those plot lines and give it to Hellboy. Like,
but also, if that was the closest he came to being an investigator in the film, if you actually look at what happened in that scene, all he did was show up, yell at the thing, and said, "You better come back, or I'm gonna like kill these fairies." And you just cut to Hellboy sitting in a recliner. So he didn't actually even do anything. He was just a thug that came in and threatened a supernatural creature. There was no investigation there.
He at least knew it was a supernatural creature. I'll give him that. But like, I don't think Sam Raimi should do this. I'm thinking give it to like a younger like horror director and be like, hey, turn this into something spooky. Give us some jumps. Give us some actual R-rated gore. And maybe follow. I would say maybe don't do Hellboy next. Do I mean, I don't think there's going to be a sequel, but if you could do a BPRD film, which is the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Development, I guess, and like actual like use some of these characters to follow that, because otherwise, and it's just a generic action romp. And we have what's her face, Mila Jovovich, and like this is on par with her later Resident Evil movies. Like, it's just how do you get from one action scene to the next? But I thought it was cool, like some of her scenes, like where she was like disembodied on the couch and watching like television, and like the warthog dude's like building her parts for her. I thought he was cool a little bit. I think the effects on the creatures were really nice.
It was like when this movie was good, it was actually really good, but when it was bad, it was very bad. And that scene also, like when she's like judging humanity based on like reality show and television, it's just like, oh, I've seen that in 1,000 movies already. So, man. A
couple months ago, you said you overheard some negative feedback on this movie in some people walking by you in possibly the office or somewhere else. I don't know where you said you heard this. Maybe outside your office.
Continue, sure.
Well, you said like someone was supposed to be hired in this movie who wasn't hired in this movie.
Oh yeah, I think I actually think that did come out. I think it was wrapped up in some like Warner Brothers like Brett Ratner drama.
Okay.
But
well,
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know if that's part of this movie or what, because I mean, like I said, we haven't talked about Daniel Day Kim as the like leopard, were cheetah or whatever he was. I thought he was cool, but he didn't earn his flashback. He did not earn that flashback to
that's for sure.
Vietnam or whatever.
And also, I was expecting, I mean, I don't know exactly how faithful his design is to the comic book, but I thought it was kind of anticlimactic, because when he turned into this cheetah, he basically just looked like a cheetah, maybe with kind of bigger thighs, but like this just looks like a cat. Like, it didn't really necessarily look like a demon. It just looked like a big cheetah attacking like a warthog. So I was like, oh, maybe if it was like, you know, if it stood up on its legs and it kind of looked like a man cheetah, that might be a little cooler, but I was like,
and he got knocked
okay.
around. He didn't really do anything as a cheetah.
Yeah, and also that fight scene in general, like they started to gear up, they start fighting together, and then ultimately they lose, and then the Blood Queen comes in and just ends the fight to begin with. And I think that goes into the piss poor, awful ending. This is one of the worst endings I think I've ever seen in like a comic book superhero movie, and that's including like Skybeam movies. Like, you know, at least then you kind of know what the stakes are, and you know the climax is coming to the end, and there feels to be a little bit of like tension on the clock because the Skybeam's about to reach the big city or something like that. But in this movie, like, he just overcomes his desire to be the Demon King and just swings the sword and cuts her head off, and you know, that's it. I was expecting him to like go outside and fight some of those big giant like kaiju monsters or something like that.
The trailers lead us to believe that there's like he's actually gonna fly the demon like into like an army of hell or whatever, and he doesn't do that. That's just like a flash forward. Like this is what could be.
Yet another flashback.
Yeah, I agree. And then it just kind of ends and like, well, London's kind of been terrorized and is on fire. I think we talked about the Merlin section of this film where he goes and meets Merlin. Everyone's been buried, but they're still alive in this movie, by the way. If you get buried, you're still alive.
Yeah, apparently.
People come out of the ground, spirits do all this other fun stuff. But, like, does that not remind you of the scene in Age of Ultron where Thor goes down to the lake and, like, gets a little bit of a weird scene, and then he's like,
yeah,
now I know everything. I gotta go back to London. And I think, you know, the travel in this movie was so weird. The travel times are like they somehow get a boat up under this cove and somewhere in London, or not London but England. Then like, oh, we got to get down to London, and she's already like unleashed it. Like, how did they get down there so fast? Like, what's going on? Like how far away are they really in all this stuff?
Yeah, and
things, but I mean,
yeah, and these little things definitely add up. But you know, there's supposed to be this emotional connection between Hellboy and his dad, and I don't feel like that relationship was really earned throughout the film. You know, they have a small little moment at the beginning where you're like, oh, there's kind of like the teaching how to shave moment, or like, oh, I'll shave your face, but you know, with the horns. But
he's like, you're a beautiful person. Yeah,
and then he acts kind of more just like some sort of like project manager throughout the movie, like sending Hellboy around, and then he's just kind of like this angsty teenager that's whining about things.
He's like a Nick Fury. McShane plays like a Nick Fury. He's like, yeah, I'll be your quote unquote dad, but you know, until the world's, you know, done, we got to pretend that it's still spinning. So let's get down to work.
The scene I was looking forward to the most in this movie that I saw from the trailers was there's a moment where like Hellboy just like gets kicked and flies off the screen by like a giant, and I was really looking forward to that scene. And then I find out like, oh man, he's going to be fighting like 3 giants. This is going to be really cool. But I am not necessarily a nitpicker for cinematography. You know, when it's good, I can recognize it, but you know, I'm totally fine with just like run of the mill, like just normal shots, you know, in a movie. As long as like the story's engaging, I'm okay if the camera's not doing anything like crazy or fancy or just like glorious. But the cinematography in that scene was just so bad. The camera was so close to Hellboy's face the whole time. You could never really embrace the full scale of these like giants. And then it was just like the camera was just like whipping around. You couldn't follow anything that was going on. It just felt like I kept zooming in and out, like, you know, like back in the day when they first introduced like the screen recording capturing software when you're playing like a Halo match. Like, it feels like some 13-year-old was just like playing with the joysticks during that scene. I was like, this is just there's no craft in this movie. I feel like all the craft went into some of the practical like monsters and maybe some of the special effects there. And then all the rest was just like thrown out the window. Like, this film, it seems like it was trying to be saved at like the 11th hour, because there's so many like just really cheesy punch-up jokes. And if you're not familiar with what a punch-up joke is out there, is basically they'll bring in like these like third-party writers and comedians to be like, okay, this is our movie, it's already shot, it's basically already, you know, filmed and edited together, but it needs to be funnier, so we need you to add jokes to scenes where like characters' backs are turned, you know, so because we can't bring them back in, we can't do reshoots, but we can ADR some jokes in. So they're just so awful and they're so apparent, and I just couldn't get around it. But it's just, I feel like there's just not even enough here to really sink my teeth into it. Like at the end of the day, like when I walked out of the theater, I was just like, okay, that was a movie. I'm going to forget about this. Like, so it doesn't really feel like a treasonous act, you know, on like the comic book community, but it doesn't feel like they've added anything to the Hellboy universe, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. And I think, honestly, for people who've read Hellboy, it will be a delight. I think the story points it touched on, I'm glad it didn't rehash anything from Hellboy 1 and 2 and the Golden Army that Ron Perlman and Del Toro did. I'm glad it really went in a new direction, but if you don't know the history of these, you're going to be like, what the hell's going on? Especially, like, again, like the King, I could feel, like, the King Arthur thing, people, like, groaning, like, because if you don't know it, you don't expect it, like, but when you see at the beginning, like, oh, they're going to go down this story route, and there's, like, three big ones they kind of pulled from that are, like, in the middle of Hellboy's, like, big arcs that you're like a lot of people don't know about. So why did they pull the obscure ones? I don't know, but at least they didn't focus on the Nazis. What about Lobster Johnson? I think Thomas Hayden Church's Lobster Johnson was hilarious.
I mean, I loved that character, but he is just so not in the right movie. Like the end credit scene was hilarious. If that end credit scene was more of the DNA of what the movie was, I would have loved this film, because it's just Hellboy geeking out over this other hero. It states this kind of world that there's kind of these like heroes running through the history, and there could just be tons of this kind of stuff. You know, it just shapes kind of the universe we're in a little bit more. But then in the flashback, when they're showing like the origin of like Hellboy and where he's from, it just like, and it's a very serious moment of like these Nazis coming in doing these experiments, you know, they're all getting like murdered and stuff, and then like this kind of goofy wacky Lobster Johnson guy shows up saying these really weird one-liners. It's just like, it almost felt like this whole flashback scene needed one of those like black and white film grain filters, so it felt like you know, like a 1940s serial or something.
And that's kind of what in the Hellboy universe, Lobster Johnson is known as being a serial character. No one thought he was real. They just thought he was like a comic book serial thing until he came back, you know, later as like a ghost, and like, oh, he is real kind of thing. So like I said, from the comic book point of view, like that was on point. From someone else's point of view, I could be like, yeah, it doesn't fit in there. But did you say for the second post-credit scene?
Oh, yeah, I stayed for it just because I had to look it up, because I was like, I don't think Chris is awake. He would tell me if there's another post-credit scene. But I stuck around for it, and we got to see more creepy Baba Yaga, which is good, because she's very creepy. That's one of the successful parts in the movie.
She wants the
eye. And then she's talking to another character, which I kind of would hope would be revealed, because like, at least leave me with some sort of like another cool character design. But then they didn't. It's some sort of character that can't die, and then I googled it, and it wasn't.
It's Rasputin, who was in the Lobster Johnson scene.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, he's the guy who actually summoned Hellboy, like the bald guy with the beard. He's got a very iconic look.
Oh, okay.
And like he can't die, and he's like a through line in a lot of the Hellboy stuff. Yeah, so I mean, if you don't know, you don't. But I mean, that was more Baba Yaga stuff. Who really wants Hellboy's eye?
Yeah, yeah, it's got something in common with Rocket out there. But you know, all of these like weird ideas that definitely did not fit in the movie, and these kind of concepts weren't earned in the story, I could totally see them working in a comic book, because a comic book is like a totally different realm. It's almost kind of like when you move a medium to like animation, like when we talked about the Spider-Verse review last year. You can just get away with a lot more when you're in different mediums, but when you go live action, you just got to be really careful on like the storylines that you tread, and there were so many storylines in this. Like, did we need King Arthur and the Blood Queen? You know, did we need both of them? Could we have just like done one? And why was the Blood Queen so important? We never really got any information on why she was the big bad, and like, you know, why did her sister even need the double crosser in the first place? It's just like they're just adding so much unnecessary detail to this story.
Well, I mean, all that's there, but I don't think they kind of dropped, like, they didn't want to give us a origin film, but they also didn't want to do a sequel to the other one, so they kind of dropped us literally in the middle of a Hellboy's life, and like it really had no reason. Why was he in the middle of, like, what's in the middle of his life? So had they, had this been the second movie, probably would have been a little bit better, but it was sadly the first movie, and we didn't get that those results we really wanted, did we?
Yeah, I think this movie stretched well beyond its budget. This film was reported to have a $50 million budget. Shazam had a $100 million budget, but Hellboy did like 3 times as much when it came to just like special effects and world building, and it just didn't work. You know, it's just such a false start. I don't think this sequel. We're not going to get a sequel. I mean, the numbers are so low on this weekend. There's no way they're going to recoup their investment by the time Endgame comes out, unless for some reason this just does gangbusters overseas.
Well, I think to me, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. This feels like a movie made in the mid to late half of the 2000s. Mm-hmm. We're going to see people flock to this like they did with Van Helsing or movies of those types. Like, there's going to be a cult following of people who enjoy this movie because they've read the books. I don't think it's going to do a lot in the theaters. I think it's going to find a life afterwards, but not enough to warrant a sequel.
I mean, I know this is kind of what all Hollywood is doing, but if they could find a way to maybe make the makeup a little bit more practical on like a week-to-week shot basis, like this could be a really cool Showtime or HBO like television series. I think. I mean, it's already set up. It's there to go. Well, I mean, just week to week, he's going through another paranormal activity, maybe building to something bigger at the end of the season. I think that would be fun.
Well, like I said, if you do BPRD, like the organization he was a part of, yeah. Do a BPRD show and include some of the other characters that are in there. I think that'd be a perfect home for this. So
yeah. It sounds like we're wrapping up here, but before I think we kind of jump off of this, what did your friend think? The kind of the Hellboy connoisseur.
Oh, he it's not the best movie he's had in the world. And he's also very harsh on films. He hasn't been to the movie theater since Infinity War with me.
Oh, wow.
So we went and saw this, and he really enjoyed that they were able to touch on some of those lesser known stories that, a lot of bigger movies would shy away from. And so he had a really good time. And we talked about, how we could sit and pick it apart, but, he's just happy to see some lesser known Hellboy stuff kind of get a little bit of action. That if the pace wasn't so fast, we could have felt much worse at the end of it, because I think, again, if it slowed down at all, we'd have been like, oh god, this is boring.
He kind of sounds like a guy at the end of the day where it didn't matter whether the movie was good or bad because he could just go back and just keep reading the comic books.
Yeah, and he's like I probably won't watch it again, but he also doesn't like the Golden Army as well, as we talked about that a little bit, but he thinks maybe the first one's a little better because Abe Sapien and Liz Sherman have better. You relate to those characters more than the Alice and I forget the other guy's name already in this one, because you just don't care about him in this one. So I think he like I said, he's not a great thing. We actually, funny story, we bought our next movie tickets together. We're gonna go see Endgame, so he's already ready to go to the theater again. This didn't ruin his theater going experience. So
I was gonna say that the best thing about going to see Hellboy last night was at the end of the movie, I was able to pick up my Endgame tickets, which I'm glad I did, because usually at my theater you swipe the card you purchase the tickets online with, and it prints out the tickets. But for some reason the ticket teller was just like, "I'm swiping your card, man, but I don't see any Endgame tickets on there." So I started to basically break out in a flop sweat. So I pulled up the email for the tickets, and he was able to scan the QR code and give me the tickets. So I was just like, yes, I have them. So at least there was there was a redeeming trip to going to the theater. And I also got a cherry icy and pretzel bites, which is usually a snack I don't get at the movie theater. I did my best to wrap this movie with some positives, but yeah, it's a bummer. I had good thoughts for this movie going into it. I wanted it to be good. Obviously here at Superhero Slate, we don't want any movie to fail. But it was fun seeing the Joker trailer on a big screen. I'm getting even more excited for that film now. That's coming in October.
Yeah,
so.
And that's an R-rated film, I believe, or will be an R-rated film as well. So, yeah, we'll see more about that. But yeah, we didn't catch much. I think we maybe caught one trailer or two since we got in there late. But boy, do I love just walking in and not having to worry about that. So yeah, I think that's it for Hellboy. Again, the bar wasn't high, and they just kind of ran right into it face first.
Yeah, I don't think I could recommend spending money on this movie.
Yeah,
wait until it lands on a streaming service, because this is the type of film that will land on a streaming service after it goes through its home release. Yeah, just wait.
Yeah, you'll already be paying for that streaming service, so you won't feel too bad about it. So I agree with that there. Mike, people want to know what you're up to, where you're at, what you're doing, other movies you're doing. I don't know what else. What else do you do in your life? I don't know. Tell people where they can find more about it.
Well, they can follow me at Mike Royer Design on Instagram and Twitter, and you can read my webcomics at pickledcomics.com. Chris, if people want to catch up with you, see what you're doing in your life, where can they find you?
Find me on Instagram, Valdan87, or Twitter, Valdan, Valdan. Head over to Comic UI. You can also listen to Superhero Slate, because that's what you're doing right now, probably, hopefully. If people want to know more about Superhero Slate, where they can find us, our regularly scheduled news programs, where can they find that at?
Well, as always, all you got to do is visit superheroslate.com. You can find all the avenues we host our little podcast here. And when we're talking about the news, we got show notes up there too. So it's a great place to subscribe and keep up with everything going on out there in the comic book, superhero, TV, movie world. It's crazy. We have a ton of news to talk about this week, so make sure you're subscribed. We're going to be talking about tons of Disney stuff, Star Wars, Endgame. So stay tuned for that. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and you can get merch at superheroslate.com/store. We love hearing from you. Reach out and let us know what you thought about Hellboy. Did you hate it? Did you love it? Did you fall somewhere in the middle?
Probably didn't go see it.
Yeah, kind of like we did. You probably didn't see it, like Chris said. But reach out to us on Twitter and the YouTube comments. You can send us an email. We have a contact form on our website. We love hearing from you, and we love our super fans. If you want to be a super fan of the show, head on over and review the podcast on iTunes, or just share the show with a friend, share the show with a buddy, and we'll be here next week, everybody.
That's right, we will. I'm really disappointed, Mike, before we leave, that they didn't play Highway to Hell somewhere in this movie.
It's too on the nose.
We had Rock You Like a Hurricane in Spanish, but no Highway to Hell. So, all right, we'll catch you guys later.
All right, bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe.
We're going to do it. We're going to get this done. We're going to knock these out today. We're going to